Welcome to episode 267 of Control the Controllables. And today I'm bringing you Dr. Callum Gowling. I guess a little shout out before we get started. I don't know if you're on our email list yet. If you're not, click in the link below in our show notes, and you will be able to find a way of signing up. It's a chance to get some little exclusives that we're bringing to you. We're letting you know when podcasts are coming out. This week, we've actually got our top 10 most downloaded podcasts since we started over 5 years ago. And there's some great ones in there, some amazing names. You might not be surprised to hear Sir Andy Murray is still at the top. But there's so many to listen to. And then so many as well that we now have on YouTube as well. So if you're not subscribed to YouTube, absolutely do. And you'll be able to pick it up and just, be able to see us, And I know I like watching podcasts where you see the interaction with people as well. But you will find on there, and it's number 10, I believe, in Tom Gullickson. And he's probably my favorite episode. Second favorite episode. I know Valerie Condos Field as well. Episode 62, I remember that one well. That's a one to listen to. But if you've not heard or listened to Captain Gully, then you should. And I'd love to share a small little story. I was in New York a couple of weeks ago, the US Open. And I saw Gully, and we'll put a picture up on our socials so you can see us together. And it was so lovely seeing him. And you think, do they recognize me now that we're off screen? And I haven't spent that much time with Captain Gully, and he did. I introduced myself, but he remembered me, and he said, "You are the best podcaster ever. It's the best interview I've ever had." And he turned to his wife and he said, "This is Mrs. Gullickson." He said, "This is Dan from Control the Controllables. This is the guy I was telling you about, that amazing interview that I did, where he was in tears. He told just the best storyteller ever." And that was such an honor for me, for Gully to say that, and he remembered it with such enthusiasm as well. And then later in the week, he shouted across at me in the food hall in front of everyone. He said, "There he is, the best podcaster out there." Now, I'm not so sure about that. However, it was lovely to get the words from Gully, and we'll have to get him on the show again. But if you've not listened to that one, please do. You absolutely are missing out. And sign up to the email to make sure that you are not missing out on all of these little treats that we are bringing to you. And then here's our next one, 267. Dr. Callum Gowling. It's a brilliant one, this one. He's a great guy. He knows his stuff. Anyone that wants to know ways of working with young athletes, right? Whether you're a parent, a player, or a coach, this one really is for you. And it wouldn't surprise me if this is the one where you've got to stop and go and get a pen and paper, because there's some absolute corkers in there from Dr. Callum Gowling. So Callum Gowling, a big welcome to Control the Controllables. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thanks, Dan. It's an honour and a privilege to be on. So really looking forward to having a chat.
Well, you would say that 2 minutes after you've just told me you're a Liverpool fan. You're trying to now suck back up to me, are you?
I am indeed. I want some favourable questions. But yes, I need to keep you sweet. I'm feeling a little bit guilty speaking to a Newcastle fan, but yeah, we'll make our way through this without an argument, I'm sure.
It's great to have you, and I think, well, I know this is going to be a great listen for many people, right? We talk about it all the time. We're pretty well educated in the world of tennis now, I think, on how to hit a forehand, on how to hit a backhand. I think we're pretty well educated now, even on kind of S&C side. There's a lot on the physical side that's been out there for years. But on the mental side of the game, even though people talk about the importance, it feels like not many quite have the grasp of how to maybe develop it from a young age. And there's so many things that I want to jump into it. I'll be talking with different hats. One as a coach of players. I'm also a tennis parent, who will have some interest in that area. The starting point, Callum, for me, I would love to know, because I often think there's a story in why people get into the world of psychology or the world of sports psychology. And I guess I'd just love to know your purpose and reason why that's the route that you chose to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I've no doubt that anyone listening who who does know me from junior tennis, because I, like you, used to play a lot of tennis. Tennis was the sport I loved. And anyone listening or knowing me nowadays as a sports psychologist would probably say, "What, Callum, sports psychologist? Why?" He was he used to go bananas on court, ginger hair, bad temper, all that kind of thing. And really, that's where it started, because I'm quite honest with the athletes I talk to, in that I don't come at this as, a former expert mentally. I'm actually coming at it from completely the opposite point of view. Is I really struggled mentally as a youngster, and I'm quite happy to admit that carried on into adulthood. Some of the bad habits I developed early on, some of the insecurities and weaknesses I had as a youngster, because sports psychology back in those days, it was a subject. It wasn't really discussed other than you need to calm down, sort your head out. That was as much as it was, really. So I grew up through tennis, reasonable tennis player, pretty talented, being told an awful lot. You could do a lot if you just sorted your head out. So I didn't really see that particularly helpful. And I grew up, one, knowing it was really important, and two, knowing deep down that this is something that I don't know what it is. I just can't get to grips with it. So I grew up, slightly insecure and not very confident in that area. But I was fascinated by it because I knew from firsthand experience how much it can hold you back. And that was really where the interest came. And then many years later, I kind of slipped into coaching and was working with some really talented juniors, far more talented than me, on a really upward trajectory. And lo and behold, the conversation was exactly the same. It was nerves, it was pressure, it was trying to keep your head together on court. And at that point, I hadn't done the studies. I was, a casual observer, casual reading around the topic. And it was really at that point I felt I had to go back to university to study. So I went back and did my master's, my PhD, and then subsequent professional qualifications, because I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to support these players as best as I possibly could. And they were generally coming to me with challenges that, I was sitting there insecure thinking, look, I was really bad at this as well. I don't feel like I'm the best person to help, but you have a relationship, you feel a responsibility. So I wanted to do something about it. So it was really that complicated journey of not being able to do it, knowing firsthand all the mistakes I've made, seeing the players I was talking to, working with, make the exact same mistakes. And I thought, hang on, I don't want to give you, my flaws. I don't know really how to help, because I could never do this other than give you the cliche, stereotypical, short, sharp burst of what a good mindset looks like and sounds like. I wanted to go into detail, one, to help the players. But there was a little selfishness there because it was something I was interested in and I wanted to work on myself. So that's really my journey to where I am now, a really obsessed learner. And even when I was coaching tennis, I noticed that I was increasingly less interested in the tennis. I was more interested in the person. And that's what kind of drove me to go to the study side of things.
If someone was to have said to me, take a guess on why he got into it, I probably would have guessed at that. And because it's like, it's almost it's pain that initiates a change, right? And that word actually, and that word pain, I think, is quite an interesting word, because when I look back to my junior days, and also my professional days as a player, pain is the word. That kind of turmoil you feel, and you catastrophize those feelings, and you're obviously living your world at that time, right? And I know that kind of my pattern that would happen is, because I don't know exactly what you were like, but I know that I was pretty crazy at times. It then turned into shame, because it was almost like people would then say to you, well, just sort it out. If you just sort your mind out, if you just do this, if you just do, like you said it there, like calm down. Nobody in the world of calming down has ever calmed down by being told to calm down, right? But like being told to calm down, all of those sort of words and those terminologies. And it was like, and I've used this example on the pod a couple of times, but I think it's relevant right now. I remember watching Marat Safin with my dad, And Marat Safin was my age, and I'd beaten him a couple of times in the juniors. And, I guess he was kind of my peer in lots of ways. But at 17, 18, there he was winning matches at Grand Slams. And he smashed a racket. And I remember my dad saying, "Oh, it's just a disgrace, like if only he could control his mind," or something along those words. And I remember sitting there thinking, if only he knew how to. Like I wish I knew how to, but nobody ever taught me how to. There was never any tools in place. There was so then I think then the frustration grew, right? The shame grew because people were calling me out on it. The frustration grew because I didn't know how to fix it. Like there was so many kind of things that just built on. And I was no longer annoyed and frustrated that I was losing or hitting a bad shot. I was going into this guilt phase that then just kind of wrapped it. And I think, well, now that I'm 45 years old and been around this sport a long time, that's normalized to me. That's what pretty much everyone feels, whereas at the time I thought I was the only one, so if I was to say to you, you're a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, knowing what you now know, what sort of things would you like to have had in place that maybe would have helped your journey when you were a younger tennis player?
I mean, that's a great question, and that's where I am now in my own professional reality. Is two things, I think, to answer that question. Is one, the more honest conversation, exactly what you've just said. Look, that's normal.
Yep.
Some of the negative self-talk I would give myself pre-match or during the match, it was horrific. Some of the things I would say to myself or think before a tennis match, in terms of within the realms of tennis, I'm definitely going to lose. I'm going to play so bad. He's so much better than me. You can't win this. You always lose the big matches. That was me, and that was where I was. And then all of a sudden, somebody comes in and says, "Come on, you should be confident. You should believe in yourself. You shouldn't be feeling like this. You've got to stop this." And again, on surface level, yeah, good advice, but never really got to grips with what's triggering this. Why on earth does this stuff just start coming out? I know I love this sport. I know I do. And I do think I'm good at it, genuinely. But, before a match, that all disappeared. It wasn't fun. There was zero confidence. And I was stuck in this miserable cycle of negative thoughts. So those honest conversations, like you just said, Dan, that it's normal. I think sometimes we're a little bit scared of having that conversation that this is how you should be. And we have this idealistic view of what a good mindset looks like. And that's really easy. We could all look at Federer and say, look, this is what you need to be like. Or Nadal, look at these guys. That's what you need to aspire to. But there's so much shades of grey along the way. Marat Safin, great example. Super talented, world number one, Grand Slam champion. Yeah, he had some flaws with his mindset. Definitely, he possibly could have achieved more. But also, credit where credit's due. Look at what he achieved. He still managed to get a performance out of himself, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in this universal perfect view of good.
Yep.
I'm interested in, how do you, as an individual, Dan, we know you've got this fiery temper. How do you get the best out of yourself? Maybe we need to use that and channel it. And I think so those conversations still to this day need to happen more. I think we're too quick to shut down any display of frustration or anger on the court, because it's easier messaging, it's easier to deal with and cope with and coach.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, for some players, that's the worst thing for them to do. They need that. So the honest conversation, I think, is the first thing. I think there needed to be more of that, because I just grew up thinking, I'm a weirdo. There's something wrong with me. Like no one else feels like this.
Yeah.
So I think that, and that stays with you. That stayed with me till mid-20s. Genuinely, I felt like, you're the guy who can't deal with pressure. I was a talented sportsman and I'm pretty bright. But at that point, you're not going to be a high achiever because you can't deal with it. You'll just blow up. And that was me. Yep. The second thing is, more time and attention. I know it's not convenient. I know it's, there's time, there's money involved, all of these demands that children have, and the stigma to say, I'm going to go and speak to a sports psychologist, or whatever it is you want to call this person, a mental skills coach, a mindset coach. Really, the label is irrelevant. It's a person that you can go and talk to and say, look, this is what's happening, without fear of judgment, without fear of, come on, what are you worried about? So it's a tennis match, there's no big deal. Without that, which I think sometimes people will say that because they don't know what else to say and they think they're saying the right thing, where in actual fact, the best thing you can do for that person in the moment is the classic, I understand. Yeah, it's really hard out there. So much pressure. You're so brave just to step out there. But if we're going to get a performance out of yourself, what are we going to do? Because we know next time you step on court, you're going to feel like that. You're going to tell yourself you're rubbish. You're going to tell yourself you're probably going to lose. And when you make that first unforced error, you're going to go nuts. We know it's going to happen. Let's not hide from it. Let's actually talk through the scenario and spend some time and say, right, here's that moment. What are we going to do right now? So it's not a surprise. The guilt, the shame. I speak to so many players now. When they get nervous, they feel more nervous for feeling nervous because they think this is wrong. When they get angry, they get more angry for feeling angry, and they start blaming themselves, and this whole inner dialogue goes, oh, you shouldn't be feeling like this. Everyone's watching. They've told you not to do. So you just get caught and you're just going further and further away from, right, next point, what are we doing? And I do think the discipline of sports psychology is needlessly overcomplicated. I've studied it. I did my PhD in it. The wording, the language, it's needlessly complicated. And I think that puts some people off, definitely. But then sometimes I think we go too far the other way and say, well, it's just this. You just got to enjoy it and stay calm. I mean, what's simpler than that? Come on. And there's that grey area in between that me, you, we've got similar experiences, but how I get the best out of my angry self might be different to you. Maybe I had to really work hard to calm down. Maybe you, it's like, no, come on, use it. Like Djokovic, come on, use it. You fire yourself up. Use that as fuel to get better. Because we don't spend the time to have these conversations, I think we just try and have this one universal approach that, right, you can't behave like that on court. It's just not on. It's too negative. That's not helpful. Stop it. So yes, some of the stuff, the swearing, the racket cracking, if it's costing you £200, it needs work. But there's so many displays of emotion out there that I see kids doing. Actually, it's not that damaging to their performance. We're not trying to raise perfect saint-like human beings on court. We're trying to raise competitors, people who know how to get the best out of themselves within certain parameters. And I think sometimes because we don't really want to have the conversation because we don't want to make time for it, I think we oversimplify. And I think there's a lot of young people, which is my main passion to help them, but a lot of athletes who feel like this information isn't aimed at me. I fall outside these parameters, and then it turns into what the hell is wrong with me? And then we've got a slightly bigger problem. So I would say honest conversations and more time spent on the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's a great answer, and it's like it's such an interesting topic, right? Because also I think the individual nature of tennis versus the affordability of tennis, which often puts us in group sessions and group environments. So when you then have a tennis club, or like myself, I've got a tennis academy, you kind of need to set these boundaries based on a collective. And I've certainly seen it over the years where, one racket goes and then the next racket goes. It's like a domino effect, in terms of how that, and then actually what we're probably talking about then is we're talking about just a habit form, bad habits forming rather than it actually being an expression of emotion, really, and that's, the challenge of like, okay, well, we know here we have someone that's maybe a little bit more challenged in this area, and they're someone that needs to get it out, the perception right away. Then you get the little parent groups and you get the little people starting to talk, and how are you going to accept that? And that shouldn't be possible. So like, if I bring to you almost, I was trying to think of a concise way of asking this in terms of like, I guess, mindset versus behavior. where do you find the line, the collective line? Let's say you have a group of 20 players of different ages. At what point does that overstep and you have to, and I guess then the second part of that question is, who is responsible for that? Is the responsibility for that parents? Is the responsibility for that tennis coach? How do you get that right in I guess in junior sport?
Again, great question. And, I wouldn't have expected anything different from yourself, Dan, being so experienced and knowledgeable yourself. And look, I'm not sitting here with any silver bullet. It is a complicated process. And that's why I think we're guilty of oversimplifying. Whose responsibility? Great question. It's everyone's. It's players, coaches, and parent. You can't separate this. You're on the journey together. So the messaging has to be consistent between the three parties, primarily coach and parent as the adults in the relationship. There has to be consistency with that message. The messaging at academy level, in group level, has to be about performance under pressure. We're not so much identifying specific behaviors. We're not being quite so controlling. We're actually talking about more, well, what was your response to the stress and what was the impact on your performance? And I think on a group level, it's definitely a challenge. The vast majority of my work is one-to-one because it's personal, it's very individual, and sometimes it's confidential. So to get to the heart of the matter, the real root cause of what's the explosion, that's a really personal conversation that needs to be had. So on an academy level, I would suggest it's more micro sessions. It's short, sharp conversations regularly throughout the week with a person, whether it be the coach or whether it be a designated individual. I understand time is a factor, but micro sessions, 15 minutes to consistently throughout the week to have those honest conversations. In the group environment, I don't think we can be that controlled. I don't think we can be that prescriptive. It has to be, okay, we're all here, we're in a group. There's certain things, definitely swearing, rackets, ball abuse, definitely. For a group, that's a no-no. But if we're having the conversation that, look, Dan gets the best out of himself, he's a different type of athlete, he needs to show some passion out there. We have to outline those parameters at the academy level so parents understand and the players understand at the start of term that, look, we're not all trying to behave like robots on court. There's certain things that are a no-no, definitely. But I think if we're trying to, and I see it a lot in this country in particular, the UK, if we're trying to just promote, right, no reaction to that mistake, just turn around, get on with it, nothing, don't want to see a reaction, I don't think that's healthy. I think we have to create somehow within a really trusting environment, and this is one, in my opinion, why it's so hard to get right, to create an environment where everyone is working together for the same end goal of, right, we want these young people getting the best out of themselves. Okay, well, what's right for Dan? Okay, well, if he's within these parameters with how he reacts to an error in practice, he's okay. Callum, he's really quiet. He needs to be behaving like Federer out there. That's where he plays his best. So if you see Callum effing and jeffing, we just need to pull him aside and rein him in. So even within a group scenario, there has to be an individualized approach to how we talk to that player and what we're looking for in that player, because how every single individual reacts to that unforced error and what's the best way to get to the next point. There is never going to be one universal, this is what you need to do, all of you. I think that's where the conversation is hard, is challenging. I'm open to it. This is what I'm facing all day, every day. Governing body level, I'm constantly approaching governing body saying that we need to do more in this space. Whose job is it? Well, at governing body level, their approach is it's coach's job. Coach does all of this. It's them to draw the lines and enforce the rules. I think that's overly simplistic, and I think that's putting way too much pressure on the coach to ask them to do all of that, and then ask the child, even a 15, 16, 17-year-old, to take all of these different messages from one person technique, tactics, footwork, physicality, and I want to see the mental skills. I want you on point with that as well. That's a lot for one person to deliver and one young person under pressure to take all of those different messages and filter out and say, yeah, I've got it. So within the group environment, yes, you've got to set certain parameters that are quite broad but strict. But then within each individual session, there has to be en masse amongst the coaching team quite an individualized approach for each person, so we know, right, now Dan's on track. I know he's angry, but he's okay. That's what we're happy with him like that in a match. And parents need to be on board with that, and that's why communicating with parents is so important. Because if I'm, if I say one thing on court negative and you jump on me, and Dan's next to me, kind of giving it a little bit, that doesn't look great from the sidelines. Why are you picking on Callum? Why are you letting Dan get away with it? But it's not that. We have to take a more mature, broad perspective at this. We have to be able to say, no, that's what we need from Dan, because that's what works for Dan. This is what works for Callum. So we're promoting this, and we have to have that. I'm not saying it's easy. It's actually very, very difficult. But I think we have to work towards that a bit more.
Yeah, well, I think the challenge, it's the challenge, but it's also the fascination for me in this sport, because there's so many ways it goes, right? And there's so much context that needs to be taken into account. So, I know I've got a 14-year-old boy, 1 week he's fantastic, but the next week, maybe his girlfriend split up with him. Maybe he's dealing with something that happened on his phone, that someone sent a bad message. Maybe he's just tired and doesn't know how to handle his emotions. And it's kind of a constant evolving theme. And at this point, I'd love to almost kind of connect almost what's happening in those developmental years to then actually how that impacts when you're older. I've been very fortunate the last 3 or 4 years to be working with some of the top tennis players in the world. And I'll give a couple of examples, and I'm sure they won't mind me talking about it. But one is Lloyd Glasspool, who, as of yesterday, is world number 1 in doubles. Big well done to Lloyd. And Lloyd I worked with from the age of kind of 11, 12. And he's always adopted, or certainly over the years adopted this. Anyone that saw him win Wimbledon this year, there was zero emotion shown. Zero. Just shook hands. His partner's going wild. He shook hands. Of course he's feeling something, but he just, that's the way that he's learned to be. Now, this is what I mean about context. When he's confident, that is an amazing mindset for him to have. And he's clutch. He steps up in the moments. But when he's not confident, he actually misses a bit of spark. He maybe needs a little bit of a spark to kind of get him out of one of those maybe ruts that he has. And this year I've also been working with Nikola Mektic. And Nikola Mektic, who's been world number 1, he's won Grand Slams. He talked quite candidly to me that he used to be quite an angry individual, but when he got angry, he just got so cloudy that he just never performed. So he's worked really hard on keeping this steady state. And if you watch Nikola play, he plays with that real steady state. And again, it works for him when he's confident and his partner's confident. And if you look at his results over the years, it's kind of like he has these kind of 2-3 month periods where he wins loads. But then when it's not quite going so well, then all of a sudden his partner feels he's not getting a lot of thought from him, and actually he's very challenged in that moment. And I think it's just a couple of nice examples maybe, and please do jump in a second, Callum, on it, is like of nothing's also perfect in terms of how one thing works for them, because the situation is changing all the time as well. And that's our constant conundrum, right? As coaches, as people working with people, is it's an ever-changing environment as well. But then it demands that real attention, like you're saying, and kind of almost daily attention on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, they are great examples, and as you describe in that, Dan, I'm hearing self-awareness, and this is such an important skill for life, not just for a tennis player. And this is why I'm so keen on the honest conversations, talking through negative scenarios, not to end the conversation and prepare for doom, but to have the conversation with, Lloyd, for example. And when he's in that confident state, he's pretty cool, calm, and collected, and things are going well. Great. We can all, have a clear picture of ourselves when things are going well. Muscle memory takes over, we're in the zone, and it just works. It's nice, it's lovely. That's why sport's so addictive, I guess. But it's then that awareness of, okay, well, when things are going badly, let's talk through the scenario. What happens to you? What's going through your mind? How are you feeling? And what's happening to your behavior? To separate these things out, there's how you're thinking and how you're feeling right now, which is maybe slightly negative, maybe slightly insecure because of the crowd, not feeling great, not making many returns. That's how you're feeling and thinking. Okay, well, what impact is that having on how you're carrying yourself around the court? Well, I've gone a bit quiet, not quite as bouncy in between points. I'm not bringing the same energy to my partner in between points. Having that conversation and then saying, okay, well, if that's the pattern, because that's what we're talking about here, pattern recognition, it's not a shock that a really good tennis player goes through a bad period of form in a tennis match. So it's not if it happens, it's when you lose 3 consecutive games, you feel like you've given your serve away and you're missing returns left, right, and centre. It's not if you're there, it's when you're there, rather than just waiting for something in the match to kickstart you. It's like, right, I'm good to go again. How do you get yourself out of this lull where you've lost your energy? You're a little bit in on yourself. What do we need to do to break that cycle? And that's a very deliberate thing, which again, within psychology, I think too many people write it off as it's just something you're good at. It's just a strength that you have. No, it's all artificial and it's all deliberate. The best athletes in the world, some of those behaviors, make no mistake, are deliberate. Some of that stuff Djokovic does is deliberate to kickstart something. And we all need to have that. How do you get yourself out of that lull? Whether it is, an exclamation of frustration, a shout out loud, whether it is to smash a ball into the net, just to get some anger out. Maybe that is your spark. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's not endangering anyone and you're not giving points away with warnings. This is why the conversation is so complicated and it's so nuanced and it's so important. We don't just dismiss it as just calm down, chill out and believe in yourself. It's not that. There's so many ways that an athlete needs to kickstart themselves. The only thing that matters for Lloyd is what works for you. When you're in that lull, what kickstarts you? It could be something stupid or funny. It could be something slightly angry, but actually it just kickstarts something. But we've got to know. That's what mental strength is. That's what a mentally strong athlete is able to do. That's what mastery is. We understand ourselves so well that everything I do is intentional and deliberate. I know how to get myself into the zone. I also know that tennis matches, go beyond my control sometimes. The players just play too good. They're playing lights out tennis. There's nothing I can do. The scoreline's making them flat. Well, in that moment, what are you going to do about it? Have an answer. And there needs to be an answer that is intentional and deliberate, that is born out of self-understanding, that has been trained at the academy in practice, because that will have happened in training. They'll have had an awful half an hour, miss hits everywhere, unforced errors. I'm playing so bad, this is awful. Okay, there's your moment. What are you going to do? How are you going to kickstart something right now to get you through the next half an hour? Because you're going to need that in your next tournament. These things aren't a surprise. You mentioned, I think, before we started recording about the word habit. Everything is habit forming. We as humans fall into habits so easily, good ones and bad ones. So the practice habits we want, every single one of them is deliberate. We're not just on court training technique and footwork and flowing around the court and hitting great shots. We're there to groove technique and shots and intentions with tactics in points, definitely. But we're also there to groove and train our response to unforced errors, to going 3-love down in a practice set. Right, what do we do? How do we keep the energy up? Because if your energy drops, we know where this match goes. So there's so many things that are happening in training that, yes, it's not as stressful as a match. Of course it isn't. You haven't got everything on the line like you have in a match. But actually, to be able to understand, right, there's certain behaviors I need to execute right now that are a little bit of an act. Fake it till you make it, and motion triggers emotion, all these cool phrases, they're important. It's the focus within training, not just about the technique and the tactics. It's about the habits that we're going to use, the skill, the mental skill, physical, behavioral skills. What are we going to do when the proverbial hits the fan? It's not a surprise that it happens. It's going to. How do we respond? And having an answer, which is where the vast majority of my conversations are, which is why, maybe some people are scared of these conversations, because you're invariably talking about difficult moments. Playing well and winning, we're all even I'm good in those situations. It's when you go 3-love down, you're starting to panic and you feel everyone glaring at you. Your energy's gone. You're insecure, you're self-conscious. Right, how do we break this? It's nothing new. There will be patterns. If you analyze and reflect back over your best performances or good performances, you'll find some answers. And that's why self-reflection and self-awareness are such fundamental elements of this, a strong mindset.
If you don't deal with those in the kind of formative years, junior years, these behavioral patterns, we've all got them, right? We've all got masking behaviors. We've all got, we make validations, we create narratives, we do these various things. But if we don't actually develop an awareness in a certain situation when we're younger, how difficult is it then to shift it once we're older? And what I won't name names because it's not fair, and I've worked with a lot of players, so this is not, nobody can guess who I'm talking about here because I'm talking about them all. But it's like I see such strong behavioral patterns from these professional tennis players that I can almost predict how, especially in a doubles partnership, how it's going to go. And when you get to know the players, it's like, well, that's linked to how you were coached when you were younger. That's linked to how a parent was when you were younger. That's linked to how you've dealt in different ways, and you've learned how to behave to maybe mask an emotion that you're feeling in a certain situation. And I guess it's a bit of a vague question, Callum, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, is there steps that almost need to be taken from a psychology standpoint in order to maybe mature and develop those areas? Like, if you miss out on that when you're younger, how much harder does it then become in your older age to be able to fix it?
It's part of the challenge, that the discipline I work in, more so the mindset side of things, is grappling with, because there's definitely an attitude that, oh, don't worry about it, that will come with age. I hear that a lot, and yeah, for some it does, of course it does, but so do most things. So does strength, so does speed. They come with age. But we're also developing bad posture. We're also developing bad technique. Well, yeah, you've mentioned it, masking, covering them up with other areas. These are habits that get ingrained. I would suggest that what we're trying to do is, with the honest conversation, I always return back to that. There needs to be the honest conversation that even if you're 10 and really good at tennis, we still need to have the conversation that, look, pressure, you're going to feel nervous. And because you love tennis and you're good at tennis, when you make a mistake, you're going to feel angry. There's nothing wrong with you for that. That's coming. Yeah. It doesn't matter how much you enjoy tennis. That is on its way in your next tournament. So let's start to train a couple of simple behaviors in response to that. Something bad happens. It's frustrating. It's upsetting. It's annoying, whatever. Okay. The next thing that happens is I think and I feel about that thing, about that stressor. Okay, well, that's a well-established link. Something happens, then I feel and think a certain way. Okay, what next? Well, we need to actually practice a coping strategy. For the tennis players, the classic word is the routine. You watch any tennis player. Within that routine, there are very repetitive behaviors. There is no reason why those behaviors can't start to be instilled at the younger age. That's not a scary conversation. That's not threatening. That's not doing them any harm. It's nothing more complicated than training a split step. A split step, I say to all of the kids I talk to, look, I get it, split step's boring. Your coach is probably nagging you about your split step. You've got to do it. But the reason you do it is to prepare for the next shot so you can react. Okay. Well, in my world, so is your routine. I'm not here with, really complicated answers and really exciting stuff. We've got some behaviors that we know. There's the way we manage our behavior in the face of a mistake. It is a choice. Yeah. A lot of the kids see, I'm annoyed. I couldn't be positive. I couldn't do anything else. It was such a bad performance. No, 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 no. You played badly. You were thinking negatively. You can still manage how you're standing and walking on that court. That's a habit. You can start to train that early. Breathing, simple habit. You can train that response. If we start that conversation early, then the response to a mistake, when that negativity, that frustration starts to rain down like it does on all of us, or those nerves are pressing down on us like it does on all of us. If we can start to associate, okay, here's the nerves. Firstly, that's normal. I'm not weird feeling nervous. Okay, what a really good behavior, a really good habit right now is, okay, right, what do I do now? Just to break it down for them. And I think those habits are so simple, very trainable, and we don't spend enough time on them in comparison to the other things that we agonize over. The angle of the racket on the backswing, the ball toss on the serve, the knee bend on the serve. These things are all important, but as you know, and as I know, Dan, if this goes, those things become less important because they're not working, because you're not thinking. So actually, I think those habits can start to be practiced way sooner. If we haven't, I come across, and again, like you, I talk to a lot of really good junior tennis players. If that conversation hasn't been had until they're 16, which is what we prefer in our country, okay, now you're good. It's probably time to start working on your mindset, because that's what serious people do. Well, then the conversation comes, and through no fault of their own, if you're 16 and really good, you've got a bit of swagger. The natural response for a teenager, and it's not their fault, I don't blame them, is, you're telling me this now? It's clearly not that important, is it? Otherwise, you'd have told me this years ago, like all of the other stuff. So there is a resistance. There's definitely a mental resistance. The later the message comes in, they're already very good. What do I need this for?
And they've got bad habits in place as well.
Exactly. And they've already developed some bad habits, which are actually really difficult to retrain, because retraining them is boring. What that involves is, right, we're going to have to retrain the body language response to unforced errors in practice. You try and have that conversation with a really gifted 16-year-old, top 100 ITF, flying, say, this is the area we need to work on. That's a tough sell if they haven't been exposed to the conversation, because, in training, the arms are going out to the side. There's the casual smash of the ball into the back fence. They're habits that we've trained. To reverse that and to put in something else, turn around, look at your strings, breath, problem solve, that is hand on heart. I know it isn't. It's nowhere near as exciting as what they want to be doing, which is why it's so much preferable, so much more beneficial to put them in early. And then those conversations.
How early would you say?
I don't think it's unreasonable at 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
The age of 8, you can have conversations about breathing. Kids nowadays in school talk about, mindfulness and breathing.
Mindfulness, yeah.
Exactly. We're having these conversations early. Other sports, I know some football academies, Premier League football academies start sports psychology at 8 because of the pressure of the contract and the finances. They know 15, 16, 17, that's weighing heavy. If we haven't spoken about growth mindset and process goals early, it's really difficult. And that's coming from the football coaches. It's really difficult to reverse that mindset of, I've got to play well because the coach is watching and I want the contract. Really difficult. Not impossible. That's where it becomes very individual. You'll find some motivated, dedicated athletes who can, because they've got the drive. Those athletes do exist, but that's not the norm. The norm is the behaviors that they've set in motion from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 will be pretty enduring at 16, 17, 18. And it's going to take a seriously committed athlete who said, right, do you know what? I'm going to sacrifice 5 hours a week tennis for the next month because I really need to get to grips on this. The amount of athletes who are prepared to do that, they do exist. I do know some of them, and I don't know all of them, but I would say the vast majority would be, it's all right. It's not that big a deal because it's not been there for so many years.
What do you mean by mindset?
Yeah, good question. Wish I hadn't mentioned Newcastle now, Dan. Sorry, Isak. Yeah, part of the problem. Yeah, what does that mean? It's a very generic term. Really, all I'm talking to athletes about is how are you responding to stress? That's what we're working on. What is your physical and mental response to the stressor that we know is coming down the pipeline? Within mindset, there are all sorts of things like focus, things like concentration, things like confidence, things like resilience. So you could, all of those things come underneath the mindset banner. I try and strip it back to, okay, well, look, what we're talking about here is coping strategies. You know, one of my bigger messages beyond sport is life in general is hard. You're going to face some challenges, you know, and I think young people away from sport are well adept at understanding that uncertainty, vulnerability, doubt, they're baked into the deal of life. There is no certainty. We all have doubt. Whether we want to admit it or not, we've all got some self-doubt. And when we go into the sports arena, are you definitely going to win today? I'd love to say yes, but don't really know. And that's a really uncomfortable reality to be in. As a human being, we'd much rather know. So mindset, in my mind, is, okay, well, how are you responding to the stresses that we know are coming? Are you able to do something, whatever that is, a mixture of thoughts, behaviors, emotions, and respond to that challenger, that stressor, in a way that allows you to do yourself justice? Is that what you're able to do? Or when the stressor hits, does it then become this complicated, jumbled mix of everything I know I'm trying to do all at once, all of these cliches, all of these good ideas that I kind of know, and I just need to do it now. And then it's information overload, the athlete feels overwhelmed, and the performance goes down. Okay, well, mindset, what's going on up here from the knock up? What are you doing to manage yourself in those difficult moments? That's what I would try to simplify mindset as.
Yeah, good. No, I think why I asked that question is in my very simplified brain, and you know, this is an area that I absolutely love. This area, you know, I want to learn more. I have lots of conversations with people in this area, and I guess where I've looked at it is there's almost like bigger picture items. So there's like this ability to have an overarching, pretty, you know, good mindset that maybe stops a little bit of the intensity of thoughts and feelings that come. You know, because I guess I'll give an example. You know, I was the kid who played Monopoly or board game when I was younger, and we never got to the end because I thought that I was being wronged. So I would flip the board. You know, the board was flipped 90% of the time. You know, like I just couldn't get my head around when something being unfair. You know, and it's something I've really tried to drill into my own children, because I took this on in later life, that life isn't fair. And one side kind of settled and understood that life wasn't fair. When something unfair happened, I almost didn't experience such a strong emotion because I know life's not fair. So what's the point in, you know, it's not fair. It's not fair. You know, you can hear kids around the country saying that in different areas. I guess the second one is the name of this podcast, Control the Controllables. You know, and that's something that that's a mindset. That's something that I've really put in place as like a bit of a pillar that I genuinely do try and live by. And it's something that I, you know, when I have difficulties, which we all do in life in various, you know, whether it's personal, professional, somebody bumped into my car a few years ago, and my wife wasn't overly happy and she was struggling to let it go. And I was like, oh, well, what can we do about it? Let's just, I didn't really experience such a strong emotion, I think, because I'd got this bigger picture items taken care of. I also then would believe that, you know, a big part of us as coaches, I massively value, and this is with juniors and with professional players, I massively value, I call them almost like mindset moments. And it might be walking from the practice court. It might be walking to the match court or walking away from the warm-up court. It might be those last 2 or 3 minutes just before they go out on court. And I've been fortunate to be around athletes before they play Grand Slam finals or major finals, that you might just be able to influence where their mind is sitting going into that match. But then the second part, or the big part for me, is once we're in battle and once we're starting to experience the emotions and the thoughts and it's then actually about having the tools to be able to use in that moment. It's got through my armor almost. If it's got through the armor of life's not fair, it's got through the armor of control the controllables, it's got through the armor of these kind of bigger picture things, then it's about, okay, awareness, how quickly we can tolerate, right? How quickly we can be aware, how quickly we can accept, and those skills become very, very challenging. So I guess my question on that is, like, how do you differentiate and almost work on those? If you might tell me what I'm saying is a load of crap, but it's how do you work on the bigger picture items and then the tools once you're in that moment?
Again, great question. Yeah, my answer towards mindset was trying to simplify, to make it something like, what are we going to do? Here's a moment. Here's a mindset moment. What are we doing in that moment? There's 3 parts to my conversations. There's the big picture, which is perspective. And, You've said life's not fair, control the controllables. For me, that's the first part of the conversation, because, as you say, there's so many stresses, so many nitty-gritty things that those phrases are brilliant. And the reason they are cliche, well-established phrases is because they hold serious weight. We've, over years, narrowed them down to something quite meaningful. To go back to your example, Dan, where, within a situation, how you looked at that situation in comparison to your wife. This is where I think we find ourselves as coaches. Often as coaches, and I would kind of classify myself in some way as a coach, we look at these things and try to teach and communicate based on our perspective. For example, cheating. It's part of tennis. You can't control it. You can't stop him from cheating. You've just got to get on with it. So There's the big picture. It is. Unfortunately, I hate it, just like anyone else, but it's part of it. You're going to see it. That, for some players who are further on in their development mentally, might be enough. Okay, there's the bad line call. I knew it was going to happen. Here we go.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that person, like the example you gave between you and your wife, hasn't reached that point of acceptance. Think of all of the learning, all of the, let's call it what it is sometimes, trauma and crisis you have been through as a tennis player or through life, where you've seen things that just aren't fair. And you've been through it and you've learned that this is part of life. And you've started to understand in your own personal journey, you're starting to understand that actually that isn't fair. But you know what? It doesn't matter what I do. It keeps happening. There's nothing I can do to stop it. So you've gone through that process of, you learn that it happens. You understand that it keeps happening. Well, once we're there as human beings, now we reach acceptance, which is another key word within psych. Acceptance, it's not, I'm okay with it. It's not, that's fine, don't worry about it. It's not, that's not what acceptance is. Acceptance is a reduction in our sensitivity to stress. That's all it is. Yep. I still don't like it. I still don't like that bad line call. I still don't like being wronged at Monopoly. But
that's where I am. That's where I am with Isaac right now. I've accepted that the rat needs to go, but I'm not happy with it.
So you've dismissed him now as a rat as well. So more coping strategies coming out. But it's a good point. But again, at your stage of development in life, you've probably gone through that process of learning and understanding quite quick. You've learned the shock news, he wants to go. You've understood that actually we've looked after him. It's clearly something in his mind. He wants to go and sign for a bigger club. Sorry, Dan. But there's nothing I can do about it. So, move on. Who else can we sign? How can, what's the team going to do without him? So within that process, This is why psych, mental skills, you're doing it all day, every day. You're going through learning, understanding, and then accepting. Once we reach acceptance, well, now we can start to cope. Now we can start to manage ourselves in that moment, which is the coping strategies, which is the nitty gritty. When that stressor gets through your barriers, when it gets through all of your defense mechanisms, here it is. It hits, it hurts, it's horrible. What are you going to do? So the relationship between the two is, we've got to have control the controllables. Great title. Okay, well, where does that apply? Well, it applies to cheating. It applies to loss of form. You can train. You can be so disciplined in training. You can have a great night's sleep, perfect breakfast, and still play badly. Accept it. That's life. It's not fair. Well, what can you control right now? Well, you can control how you react to this anger and disappointment and frustration that I was awesome yesterday in training. Well, yeah, but now you're not. What are we going to do about it? We can manage ourselves. Bring your thoughts to you right here, right now. How are you carrying yourself? How's your posture? How's your body language? How's your energy? Breathe. Right, let's get that heart rate down. Okay, you can manage your thoughts now. We get those two things under control. What are you going to do? I know you're not hitting it great today. Let's just focus on your feet. Let's bring it somewhere simple that you can control that. You can get your footwork right for the next 10 minutes. So It's this understanding, this cascading effect. And this is where I think we are with psych and tennis in particular. I think we're very good at knowing what the challenges are. Because as you say, we're pretty well developed as a tennis nation. We know a lot. Where I don't think we're quite so well developed is drilling down. We know the big picture views. Tennis is hard. The journey's long and drawn out and difficult. And only a small percentage of people make it. Really hard. What I'm interested in is, okay, well, what's that reality like? To be a really talented tennis player, to know it's really hard, to know that, and then lose first round 4 consecutive weeks. What's that like? Even though you knew this was coming, how do you feel right now? And I bet it's not great. That's where the conversation needs to be had, because look, it's a long journey. Tennis players usually lose more than they win. Yeah, it's reassuring. It's good advice and it's true. But I don't think that really gets to the heart of helping that individual who in that moment, having lost 4 consecutive weeks first round, is thinking, whatever they're thinking. If it was me, I'm a loser. I'm a waste of time. You should just give up. Okay, well, in that moment, how do we help that person cope? And I think that's the relationship between the big picture, which I think we are quite good at. I still think there's more conversations we need to open up on about the challenges that lie ahead. I think there's way more scope for us to have way more conversations there. But then go in detail. How do you cope with that? How do you cope with the first round loss? How do you cope with losing in the final when you were number 1 seed? That hurts as well. Have that conversation. How do you cope when you cruise through the tournament? You beat everyone comfortably. Now you're in the first round again. Now you've got pressure. What's that like? What's that moment like? How are you coping with this? So it's kind of never ending, which is why I think there's a little bit of a fear to open up the conversation, because it really is a can of worms. And there's no limit to how much this can impact us. If your footwork's bad, it's only really a factor on court. Your mindset's bad, it's coming off court with you. It's going back to the hotel room with you. It's going to breakfast with you. You don't really get any respite. And I just don't think we are addressing the balance well enough. I think we're never going to get to where I want it to be. I know that. I am an idealist with this because I felt pain personally. It's a horrible journey that I went through personally. And I don't want anyone else to go through that. But to minimum allocate 50% of your week on this, I don't think that's possible. I think we need more of it. It needs to be more than 50%, but I know that's not possible. But at the moment, when I sit down with a player and I say, how much of your week are you spending on this? If I get 5%, I'm pleased with their answer. It's that. And that's the imbalance. So big picture conversations need to be had. I think we need more of them. But with each big picture conversation, I think we need to drill down all the levels. This is what I'm obsessed about, is How do you feel about that? How do you feel in that moment? That's interesting. You're super talented. You're sponsored. You're amazing. How are you feeling? Are you loving this? And when you open up that conversation, there's very few times do I get the answer, this is so good. You should be me. This is amazing. Generally, the answer is, it's really, really hard. I've got so much pressure on my shoulders. I don't want to let anyone down. I'm really feeling the pressure for this next competition. I've got to keep these results going. That's what these players are taking on court with them. That's what's going on there. That's why we see at 2-2 in the first set, a player just blow up. And everyone watching is saying, what's wrong with Callum? It's only 2-2. It's like, it's a good match. Just keep going. Yeah. Well, actually, no. What that person's reacting to is the whole night before they built this match up. The whole morning they built this match up. The whole knock-up, they were analysing every little detail about their opponent, desperately searching for a weakness, and they didn't see one. So they started first game panicking, thinking, Jesus, how do I win this? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, it's a little straw that breaks the camel's back because they've been so emotionally drained from what they've been trying to cope with for probably 24 hours prior to this. So it's not a reaction to 20 minutes and 4 games of tennis. It's a reaction to what came first.
And that's an important point. I think that's an important point for all players, parents and coaches to understand as well. That it's like, it's not, and it's also not personal to coaches when a player acts like that. I think sometimes coaches take it personally. How could they do that in the first couple of games? I want to pick up on the word you used, never ending, because I actually think that's a really, really important word for people to realize, because I do think within our sport, and I'll just keep it to tennis right now, even though a lot of these things obviously are mirrored in life, we almost think, once I get there, it'll be okay. Once I win. And it's actually, I'll share something myself as a coach. I probably felt a few of those things as a coach as well. And then I sat there on Arthur Ashe Stadium on a crazy weekend in 2023 and watched my players win the mixed doubles championships at US Open and then the women's doubles, which was amazing. It was incredible. I flew home the next day and I was on court at 8 a.m. the next morning. And I was getting a load of shit from parents and a load of stuff. And life had moved very, very fast, right? Like I had this kind of injection of this amazing adrenaline. I then went to a couple of tournaments the following year. I went to a lot of tournaments the following year, but there was a couple of times I turned up and I felt like I had a little bit of imposter syndrome. My players had been competing at the highest level, but it didn't give me this automatic now feeling of like, yeah, look at me, I own this place. There was still these major, and still is, these doubts, these fears, these are all very kind of normalized, I guess, human responses. And there's a great interview, I'm sure you've seen it. If not, you need to, or whoever's listening. Scotty Scheffler, the world #1 golfer, and it's exactly that. We're doing these things, and you get this kind of this hit for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it might be. But it doesn't really, it is never ending, because now the next thing is you need to be ready, and you're supposed to show up the next week, and you're supposed to show up at the next tournament, and now you're a defending champion. And if we put so much importance on that, and we put so much importance on the result, and everything's going to be okay with the result, then actually we just end up chasing our tail the whole time and live a life of high stress, right? And Scotty Scheffler obviously very much made the point of how important his family were, and he's got that perspective and understanding that. And ironically, he went on and won that major championship the week after he made that. He said those things, and again, that's where I would bring in what my understanding of mindset as well. His mindset was in the right place to go and compete, because he delivered such a perspective outlook, and in that moment. And yeah, I guess it's just, I just want to kind of, I suppose, drill home that point of perspective. And it doesn't end. It's not all rainbows and fairy cakes and all of these things just because you win a tournament. You have a nice moment, you can celebrate it with your team, but the process goes on. Life goes on the very next day, and you've got the same stresses that you had previous, if not even more.
Couldn't agree with you anymore. It's an unsustainable mindset. It's so short term. I think sometimes as you'll have experienced the junior tennis journey, it's such a short term view. Yeah, we say it's big picture. We say it's a journey. We say it's about future development. But the reality of what the players and coaches are going through is it's very short term. It's about points. It's about wins, and they can't sustain the happiness and joy. In fact, I would strongly argue they're not deriving much happiness and joy from winning a really big tournament, because the very next week they've got another tournament, and all they're thinking now is, I've got to sustain this. So that usually the next week's competition is high stress, very little enjoyment. And the only way this week can be a success is, well, if I win again, because if I don't, I'm back down to zero again. And that's so hard, which, again, the touchy-feely side of mindset and mindfulness is, the question, the ever-ending question of why. Why are you doing this? I think there's so much value in academy level, having that conversation, start of term, end of term, start of term, end of term, and maybe a point in between, because there's a very basic talent development model, which we've known about since 1929, a guy called Alfred Whitehead. It's called the rhythm of education. And talent development, this is going back a lot, it's overly simplified, but I think it hits it on the head. Talent development goes through 3 phases. First stage is romance. Why did Dan, probably first time Dan played tennis, parents gave him a racket, brother gave him a racket, I don't know their family history. Someone gave you a racket, you started playing. Why did Dan keep coming back to tennis? Why, what was it about tennis that 14, 15, 16, Dan was this really good junior? What kept bringing him back?
Do you know what? It's I don't actually know. I think I had 2 older brothers. I think I was the younger brother of 3 boys, a younger sister as well, who I think just did everything because they did. So I think it was like just a case of like, I just loved sport. Anything that's what we did. And I always say the third child's lucky, because they almost just get brought with that wave of just, that's what you're doing. If we're playing in the garden, we're doing it here. In my particular example, it was like I was in a really small village school, but all of a sudden they were doing some tennis sessions in the little community centre, next to the school. And we just lived across from the road from there. So of course we were going to go and do that because it was sport. And it was like, it was a buzz. It was a buzz constantly to compete, to play. I just love to play. Like, I go to like birthday parties. I remember going to like, one of my first memories is going to like someone's eighth birthday party, and people are playing with like monsters and all Lego, and I'm like, what is this crap? Like, give me a ball. Like, what the like, I was so bored. Like, I just never got that stuff. Like, I really didn't. Like, and I think I probably, mature is the wrong word, but I think that was accelerated with me because of my older siblings. So I think that was very much a case of, that's just what we did. Like, my poor dad, we had a table tennis table. We had like a little dining room that was never a dining room. It was either a table tennis table or a snooker table. Quite small, but we would have like 1 month on, 1 month off between those 2 things. And that was it. Like, after dinner finished, it was like, right, who's playing snooker? Who's playing pool? So I think originally I was just addicted to sport, and then it was actually then that someone went, "Oh, you're quite good." So then I got pulled a little bit more, maybe into club tennis and into almost that pathway alongside football as well. So it was. I'm not convinced it was tennis I fell in love with. I think I was in love with sport. I just love sport. I think that was my thing. Whereas I see one of my opinion, I think people fall in love with experiences. So I think as well, it's like a 6-year-old maybe doesn't necessarily know the difference between tennis and badminton, or tennis and football, or tennis and but they know that the experience that they have, which is why coaches at that age are so important, right? Because it's the coach that sets the environment and the experience. And that's where, like, I just have so much admiration for these amazing coaches that provide this incredible experience for players, within our sport at age 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a skill that, I maybe have on a good day, but to have that on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning, and then week after week, it's like, those people are special that do that.
100%. Listening to you talk there, as you were talking, I wrote down one phrase, and then there's a second phrase that you said towards the end. You said, I just loved sport. And then you said, I was just addicted to sport. And I think that's what happens. The reason we keep coming back, it's not that you fall in love with tennis. It's that you love how that activity makes you feel. You can't quite put your finger on it, but whenever I do sport, whenever I do this thing, I feel energized, I'm alive, I'm enjoying myself, I'm not really aware of time, and I just want to go back. I just love doing that thing. And that's what sport gives us. That's why sport is such an amazing thing, or why any human being gets attracted to other disciplines, music being one of them, or singing being another one. And that's the first stage of talent development. We fall in love with something. Can't quite put our finger on why, but I do that activity. It makes me feel good, so I want to do more of it. And I think there's parallels with the journey through tennis. I think, what tennis gave you was an area where you could access that joy, that love of doing something, that joy of competing. And then the next stage of talent development, first stage is romance. Second stage is precision. So as you said, someone kind of notices you. Yeah, you're pretty good. So start to turn the screw a little bit. Let's have some lessons. Let's put a little bit more technique on that hand-eye coordination and that athleticism. Yep. So you start to develop some skills, which again is a very normal part of the development process. And then the third stage is integration, where you're trying to take that love competing, take these new skills that you've got, technique and tactics and all these kinds of new things, these sport-specific skills, and now you're trying to integrate it into competition. Okay, well, the next step now, you look loving the shapes out there on the practice court. Why don't you try some tournaments? Go and test yourself in a competition with those new techniques. And there's our process. Oh. Romance, precision, integrate into competition. But I think one thing we neglect is it's a holistic journey. And too often we see it as linear. I think too often we see it as, love this sport. It makes me feel great. Hey, you're pretty good. Why don't you try this? Learn some skills. And then the integration phase stage, over time, in my opinion, what we see is the romance get left behind. Other things become more important, which is understandable. We're starting to take it a bit more seriously. I've got other ways to measure whether I'm any good at this, usually being numbers. And over time, what we see in tennis is those things, the precision and the integration, taking on all of the importance. And the romance side of things, the original why, is tennis is the thing that gives me access to this subjective vitality, this feeling of being alive. I can compete. I can express myself and do things and feel good about myself. That's what tennis gives me. But then over time, it becomes something different. It becomes the place where I have to perform. It becomes the place where I have to compare myself and compare myself favorably to other people. And all that time, the positive sensation that we're deriving from the sport is still there in fleeting moments, but it's overridden with, but I've got to do well this week, because if I don't, I'm not going to enjoy it. If I don't, the feedback isn't going to be great. The numbers are going down. The feedback, the selection isn't going to happen. So this prioritization and often reprioritization of why are you doing this? really, what am I trying to do with any athlete I talk to? In really simple terms, to be honest with you, Dan, is let's reconnect with your why. You're not here for points. I know the surroundings and the environment might say you are, and I get it. I know it's a factor. The reason you're here is because you love tennis and you're good at tennis. That's why you're here. And that's what allowed you to get here. But then we neglect it. We forget it. We move on from it. I've got to be serious now. Can't be laughing and joking on court. This is serious. I've got a career to earn. And yes, I get it. We've got to be professional. We've got to take things seriously, of course. But you could eliminate the vast majority of sports psychologists. You could sack them all if you could go on court and prioritize, go out and have fun. Go out and be you. Go out and express yourself the way you do in practice. Go out and follow a plan that Dan's given you, but just go and enjoy it. You could eliminate, maybe not all of them, but you could eliminate a vast majority of sports psychologists. If that was the priority going on court, you would see a lot more athletes performing near their best level. Not connected to, I'm only happy if I win. No. Get engaged with what you're doing. Derive joy from what you're doing right now. That's being in the moment. That's where you get into this euphoric state that athletes are after. I'm in the zone. Well, when you're in the zone, you're not thinking about the results and the paycheck and the ranking that's going to happen. You're not thinking about that. You're just totally engaged in the now. You're not thinking about, I lost from this winning position 2 weeks ago. I don't want it to happen. You're not there. You're just so involved in, right, I've got a point to play. Here we go. Let's get this forehand into play. Accelerate, boom, bang. It's so invigorating. You feel so engaged in what you're doing. But then when we start burying it under all of this other stuff, well, that gets lost. And then the athlete starts moving away from the zone because there's too much thinking going on. There's too much forcing it. There's too much, I'm here because I have to be. I'm here because I should be. No. If we simplified it all and said, why are you here? I'm here because I want to be, and I love competing, and I want to try out this forehand, and I want to keep ripping this forehand. And that's why you're here. And
very good.
I know that sounds simple. And I know some people will say, you can't, it's just, yes, it sounds nice. Yeah, but overly simplistic. That's the most elite mindset you can get. That's worth aspiring for. That's worth putting the effort into. And that's where you'll find your best performance.
Well, I'm going to back you up with two very, very quick stories. So one, Iga Swiatek came to Salt Tennis Academy, my academy, a few years ago. She came as defending Roland Garros champion. She was young. She was 19, 20. She was highly emotional through the kind of 10 days that she was there. You could tell there was a lot of stress she was feeling. It was before she went to play in Rome, and then obviously is defending champion in Roland Garros. She was lovely. She was a sweetheart. And we do a thing at the academy where at the end of every week we do a circle, which very much kind of talks about the unity of Soto Tennis, being part of Team Soto, and it's a chance for us to share stories and on values of the academy, giving player of the week based on that. Sometimes a place to kick people up the backside, to celebrate achievements. It's kind of our thing we do. And even if you're Iga Swiatek, you come in our circle. That's what happens when you train at the academy. And Iga came in, and we presented her. Our number one value is gratitude, so we present people with t-shirts when they come, and we have our way of showcasing that. They do a little lap of our circle, and we clap them, and then Iga said a few words, and Iga got quite emotional as she spoke, and she just said, being around all of you young tennis players and kids this week has really helped me reconnect with why I started playing tennis. Because I often forget why I'm playing tennis, and I remember seeing this youth and seeing this enthusiasm, the real love of the sport. And it was really quite touching to hear her say that. So that's the first story. The second story, one of my neighbours, previous neighbours in Spain, was a guy called Alvaro Quiros, who is he was actually the longest driver on the PGA Tour a few years ago, but he kind of completely fell off the face of the earth. And I was having a conversation with him, and I said, what are you working on right now? He was trying to make his way back up. He said, I'm working on one thing and one thing only, and that's just to find the joy of the sport again. That's it. It's all I'm working on. And that's something that it's right there. And for me, you've completely hit the nail on the head. Now, Callum, I think it's a nice place to kind of tie up the conversation a little bit before we go on the quick fire. Otherwise, I think I'll take up all of your day, because I've loved our conversation. I'd love to talk to you more. You've been fantastic, but I can't have you on without asking the role of parents within this, because it is a collective. It is very much, it's a collaboration. I talk about this a lot. The player gets one go at this, right? They're the drivers. They're like the Formula One driver, and then there's the supplement and support team around, from tennis coach, fitness coaching, mental coaching, physios, whatever it might be, but also the family are a massive, massive part of that. And in order for us to provide the best support, and in order to help people have the best mindsets, we want to obviously have that collective all working together. So where do the parents come into this? And if parents that are listening to this, what's kind of almost the biggest area that they can do in order to support this healthy mindset moving forward for their child?
I think it would be the same piece of advice for all three, because I see the parent as equal importance. It's a collaboration. There's no hierarchy in this relationship. There genuinely isn't, particularly in junior tennis. There's zero hierarchy. Player, coach, parent, you're all equals. And that has to be a priority. The key, the thing to prioritize for a parent is the relationship. If you see, I'm so passionate about this, it's heartbreaking. I see a player working with a coach. They've got a bond, they've got a connection, it's working, there's improvement. It's not comfortable, but it's working. That player has the coach's ear, and the coach has the player's ear. That's worth its weight in gold. You cannot put a price on that. That's worth way more than any qualification. And I can't stress that enough. The mistake I often see parents make, and I'm certainly not blaming them, is because often it's their first attempt, first time within the sport. And there's many tempting messages out there, and you see certain players shoot up the rankings, and the immediate thought is, right, where do they train? And I think sometimes there's they sacrifice the relationship for what's deemed as a better venue, or deemed as a better squad, or deemed as a more highly qualified coach. And there's so many reasons why one coach might have higher qualifications than another. It's not just ability. There's many other social factors that might go into that. But if you see a coach who's professional, doing their job, knowledgeable, and there is a connection on court, a human connection, that's the priority along this journey. Because if we're going to harness the romance, the enjoyment through all of these, we've talked about, we haven't even covered a tenth of some of the challenges and the stresses that lie ahead. If we're going to maintain the love and the joy of the sport and the romance for the sport through all of that, you can't do it alone. Nobody can. And the parents are going to question themselves so often along this journey. And I work with parents. Parents will reach out to me and they'll just be blunt and say, are we doing something wrong here? Because this used to be fun. That doesn't look fun. What are we doing wrong? So they are, there's no one more passionate about getting this journey right for their child than a parent. They won't always make the best decisions. That relationship has to be three-way, has to be equal. The coaches, they've got so many insights, so much expertise. Of course they have, and they're so passionate about the journey. But they'll have been through that journey. If you've been coaching 20 years, 400, 500, 600 times. You're not learning this lesson for the first time. You've been through this 500 times. So it's normal. It's easy for you. It's natural. When you're facing a parent who this is maybe their only child, or their first attempt with an 11-year-old who's they've been told has got loads of promise, they're coming at this for the first time, and they're seeing this whole world as like, whoa, how do I get my head around this? So they're coming to you with a lot of questions, many of them unanswerable, a lot of stress and pressure, because they're really struggling themselves. None of this makes sense. And it's the coach. The coach is going to have to support the parent as well. And that's why this relationship has to be two-way, three-way, because well, I won't say can't. I don't believe you can navigate that journey healthily for the child, who is the priority every step of the way. I don't believe you can navigate that journey healthily without a really strong, supportive, cohesive relationship between the three of you. So my advice for parents would be, again, the honest conversation. It is a hard journey. Tennis is an amazing sport filled with so many opportunities, but it's hard. There's going to be challenges. You're going to question yourself. Sometimes you're going to question the coach and think, is this the right coach? Sometimes you're going to question your child and think, do they like it? Are they trying hard enough? That's coming, because it's sport. There's no perfect way. It's so hard. So that's why if you see your child on court with a coach who's passionate, is caring, is knowledgeable, is professional, is doing everything for the greater good of your child, if you see that, be very careful. Be very careful at saying, thanks very much, Dan, but quite fancy it over there. There's more players there. And again, it's common. It's tempting. I understand it. I've seen it go wrong so many times. And unfortunately, it's the child who suffers. And it's the relationship that helps to take them through that journey.
Callum, you've been a star. You really have. I think it's a nice place to finish this first episode with you up. It's fantastic advice. It's something that I hope lots of people do take on board. But are you ready? Before I let you go, are you ready for our quick fire round?
I am. Didn't give me a heads up on this, Dan. I'm sorry about the ESAC comment.
I don't do any heads up on this podcast. That's none of that stuff. In an office or on the court? Sports psych.
On the court.
Doubles or singles?
What is that? My preference?
Yes.
Knowing what I know now about me, doubles.
Rafa or Roger?
Oh, Roger.
Carlos or Yannick?
Carlos.
Serena or Venus?
Serena.
Should we have medical timeouts or not?
No.
If we should we then have mental medical timeouts or not? You know what I mean? It's like it is this kind of subject, right? Of physical and mental, because that's a big one for me. And I don't want to open it up for us to jump into this again, but maybe another time. It's so normalized that we look after the physical side of a player, whether that's from a training perspective, whether that's from, having these timeouts on court or whatever it might be. Whereas we don't seem to quite have the same care on the mental side. And maybe like you're allowed one mental timeout, but then that goes against the sport probably as well.
Yeah, I should caveat the physical timeout. The reason I said no is I think it gets abused. And I don't like the way it gets abused. That's why I said that. If there's a serious injury, obviously. But I would say no. Mental timeout, no. And I don't know if this is another question. I'm not a big fan of on-court coaching.
Yeah. How do you stop it, though? Because it always happened. It happened before.
I just mean, some of the stories that we made, we've experimented with little moments where you can have a chat with your coach. I think one of the great things about tennis is the combative nature, and you're out there on your own. I think we need to protect that. The on-court coaching, I think we just need to empower officials a little bit more, and they need to call it out a little bit more, because some of it is so obvious and it shouldn't be happening. I know some competitions they say, it's part of it, but I just think a blanket, it shouldn't happen. I think once you're on there, done the work, ready, off you go, figure it out for yourself.
Well, I think the biggest impact you can have as a coach is actually on the emotional side of the game, actually, which has always been allowed. It's always been allowed to say things like, come on, this one, right now, come on, a little extra 5% now. Let's lock in here. Like, those things have always been allowed. And I actually think that type of, you can actually do it a little bit with body language. You can do it with a clap. You can do it with tone of voice. It's not that. I'm not sure if I'm playing against you and someone says to me, just make them play more backhands. and I'm not in a great headspace, I'm bloody trying to make him play backhands, but he's running around like, or my backhand's like it's quite hard. Tactical elements are quite difficult unless you go to real nuance. And if you go to real nuance, you need more time. And it's hard. And certainly in these arenas at these big tournaments, like this week, I've had the players like look back, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. And I'm like, like trying to like put my hands there and like say like it's actually, I think it's an unbelievably difficult skill to help someone in a match actually. Which is where I get your point fully, and I think I'm there, but I also think the skill of coaching in a match is so difficult that I'm not sure it's as impactful as we like to think as coaches. And I think sometimes we actually can make it worse. It's a bit like when parents talk to their players at tournaments, and like maybe an LTA grade 4 event. And like, why the parents? Well, let them talk as much as they want. It's like, it's not performance enhancing. I can tell you that. There's some parent behind that screen. It's probably making life a lot worse. What is one rule change that you would have in tennis?
I think one serve would be interesting. I think that would certainly create more rallies, but I think that adds an interesting nuance with pressure as well. So I would say one serve might be interesting to see what that looked like.
Very good. And what's one daily habit that you would recommend, the golden habit that you would recommend that would help all junior tennis players?
Daily.
I know that it's, one daily habit. I know it's different on different people, but if you were to pick a golden one that if everyone took that on board, it would help the majority of them.
I would say make a point every day of writing down 3 things that you've done well or 3 things that you're pleased with every day.
Love it.
I just think we're so heavily focused on improvement and negatives. I think we often neglect the good things.
Very good. Great answer. And what does control the controllables mean to you?
Is this the last question?
There's one more.
I might get a time out on this one. What does it mean to me? I mean, I often use the phrase control is an illusion. I think I like the phrase, but I think sometimes it trips us up as well, and it prioritizes the sense of control. So I actually think that phrase highlights the contradictory nature of being a human being, because I would ask the question, how much and what are you actually in control of? And I would caveat that, because it is a good phrase, Dan. You could go to me, for example, many times I could go to bed at 10 o'clock tonight. I still might wake up tomorrow morning tired because I might have an awful night's sleep. I can control my bedtime, but I can't control how I sleep or what mood I wake up in tomorrow. And I think it's a healthy mindset, a slightly more open mindset, where we say, look, whatever happens, I'm going to be able to cope with it. I'm going to be able to adapt to it. So I think it's an interesting phrase that highlights the contradictory nature of life.
Great answer. Who should our next guest be on Control the Controllables?
Is budget limitless? Can you get anyone down?
Well, I should caveat that question with you are responsible for getting them on. It's a passing of the baton.
I'm going to be selfish. Zabalenka. I love listening to Zabalenka, and the reason she's my favorite player is her honesty about some of her flaws, and that's right up my street. I'm big into honesty and reality, and here's what it is. Here's why we cope with it. So I'd love you, with your interviewing skills, Dan, and your personality, to delve deep on the insecurities and flaws within Zabalenka.
Let me know when you've got it set up. And I'm there.
I missed out. The easy one. Isak. Just ask him why.
It's starting to hurt me too much. You're talking about him. Callum, I said it before, but I mean it. You've been a star. I've loved the conversation. It's very enlightening. I'm sure to everyone that's listened. Thank you for giving your time on a Saturday afternoon as well. I know I've not been the easiest the last couple of weeks to get this right. Thank you for sacrificing your time during a big house move as well. It's much appreciated, and all the very best. And we'll be in touch. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dan. Thank you for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed the chat. It's really good to speak to someone so knowledgeable and honest about their own journey as well. And I think tennis needs more people like you, knowledgeable, but open and honest as well. I think that's a really important thing to help inspire young people through our sport of tennis. So more so, thank you.
Thank you.